Hey everybody, in this video I am going to demonstrate to you how to do a t-test. And a t-test, as we discussed in class, is simply a comparison of means statistically between two groups. So I demonstrated this to you in class, but I'm going to give you a recording of it here because I think it will be very helpful. So I'm going to create a new section. Oops, and actually maybe not. Maybe we won't do that. Here, starting on lines 23 in our script, we talked about looking at the relationship between a categorical variable and a continuous variable, and we started with the describe by function. Here in our script, we left it with length of stay by gender, and we had group box plots. And so really what we're doing with the t-test is just trying to see how extreme those observations that we have in that describe by function are. So we're going to just start by running, let's start with a box plot of length of stay by gender. And I'll illustrate this with that to begin with. And whoops, we got this very squishy here, but here we see this length of stay. Now we don't have the means, but we do have the medians, and it looks like the median length of stay for female patients is longer than for male patients. Also, the height of the box is a little bit higher for females than for males, so it looks like there's a little bit more variability. The top of the whisker is a little bit longer for women than for men as well. So I think it'll be interesting to do a comparison of means because that really is what a t-test is. So let's use that describe by function, and it's going to remind us that we need to require, we should be using the psych package. So I'm going to say require psych, because if we don't require the psych package, we're going to get an error. So I'm going to make sure that the psych package is checked in my packages pane. And it is, so we're in good shape. And so now we can just do this describe by. And we see that for the 64 women in our sample, the mean length of stay is more than 3 days longer than for men. For men, it's just over 16 days. For women, it's 19.16 days. But we, just like the height of the box, we saw being wider, we do see more variability in this with the larger standard deviation for women than for men. And that median that we saw in the plots pane for women, that was at 12 and a half, and for men it was at 9. So now we can do a t-test to see, well, how extreme are those differences? So the way we're going to do this, it's t.test, and we put our continuous variable first, followed by a tilde, and gender. And that should help us out. Oops, I hope that don't know what we got going. Yeah, our little error button went away. And that will tell us whether there's a significant difference between those men and women. Okay. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Let's run that. And here we go. So just as we saw in the describe by, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, the mean length of stay for females. Now in the t-test, the output goes out more than 2 decimal points. That's why you see 19.16 here and 19.15625 here, and 16 days for men. And the null hypothesis would be that there is no difference between males and females. So the difference between males and females would be equal to 0. The alternative hypothesis, the hypothesis that we're testing, is that the true difference in means, meaning in the population, not in this sample, that the true difference in the means is not equal to 0, meaning they're not the same. And the p-value that we look at is right here. And we see the p-value at 0.2865, which is way greater than 0.05. It means there's a 28.65% that if we did this test 100 times, that there is a 28.65% chance that in the population we would find this level of difference or more, something more extreme, more than a quarter of the time. So there's no significant relationship between what we observe in our sample and with these two variables. We couldn't reject the null hypothesis that what we've observed actually is the case in a population of elderly hospital patients. So let's take a closer look at this. And we've looked at length of stay with gender. Why don't we take a look at length of stay by having a spouse? Because maybe having a spouse at home helps hasten discharge. And then we'll think more about returning within 30 days. Now our box plot, we're going to have to change the label. So our label is going to be length of stay by spouse. And we're going to have patient has a spouse, and then nothing should change on the y-axis. So let's just do this first. Oops. Length of stay spouse. Looks like we have, maybe not, just have to run it. And the no group, the length of stay is, so the patients that don't have a spouse had a much longer, it looks like, length of stay. Notice the height of the box is much smaller for the yeses, so much less variability, as well as the median is lower, noticeably lower than what we had for the gender. So now we can look at the amounts of time in the describe by function, and we see that for those who did have a spouse or a partner living with them at home, that was 86 patients, their mean length of stay was only 12 and a half days with the exact same standard deviation. And notice this median line then is here is 7.5. So the mean length of stay for those that didn't have a spouse or partner living with them at home was over 22 days with a median of 15. So, it's much higher and much more variability. So now we can do our t-test, and we'll hit run. And again, the results here, the mean in the yes group, meaning yes, they have a spouse or partner living with them, is, we have a 10-day difference here. And the question is this a significant difference that we could possibly generalize to a larger proportion of hospital patients? And here we see our p-value is less than 0.05. It's way less than 0.05. In fact, there's only a 0.03957% chance that in a population that didn't have this actual 10-day difference or so, that we would see something as extreme or more extreme than what we've observed here. So we can pretty confidently say in a sample of elderly hospital patients that having a partner living with them is related to length of stay in the hospital, with patients who have spouses staying, on average about 10 days less than those that don't have spouses. And I hope you found this useful. Now you're going to get to practice this as well on your own for homework.